Hey everyone, this is Jeff Maverick Barrington from the Crofters Section 2 Astley Bridge League in Bolton, captained by my main man Simon Isherwood. We are league winners and we are listening to the weekly Dartscast. This is Alex and this is my impression of a 180. 180! Good night everybody.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. I'm Alex Moss, and before I ask how my co-host Burton DeWitt is, let's just take you back to Friday night, the World Series finals, and John Rawling, the commentator, suggesting a new name for this podcast. Roll audio tape.
An interview with him on one of the boxing podcasts this week, and I think he was surprised to have done as well as he did in getting to that final. And all he's saying this time is, I'm not going to win this event. He's keeping it real. He just wants to do himself justice and play well.
So we're no longer the weekly Dartscast. We're now one of the boxing podcasts. Thoughts on that, Burton?
Well, considering I haven't watched a boxing match since approximately 20-something years ago, I'm probably just as qualified for that role as I am for this, so I'm fine with it. Should we get rid of the script and switch over and talk some other stuff?
I think we're going to stick with the darts. Apologies, John, but yeah, this is the weekly Dartscast. Burton, moving on. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you, Alex?
Doing all right, thank you. Been quite a busy day so far, travelling from Bolton down to London. I'm in my hotel room here in Stratford ahead of the Target launch later today. Looking forward to that. But before then, plenty to discuss. We've got the former champion of the world, Scott Mitchell, calling later. He's going to be playing in his first European Tour event this weekend. So you're going to hear from Scotty Duggar a little bit later on. But we're going to start with a look back at the weekend and Michael van Gerwen winning a record-extending 5th World Series of Darts finals title. He threw a 9-darter on the way as well. But is he now the unofficial number one and the player to beat again?
He's definitely still in that conversation. This was on home soil, and that definitely helped him. But beyond that, he's won the Premier League this year. He's been very consistent, or at least more consistent than he's been in the last few years. He's always been in contention. And there's only one other person who you can say that about, and that's Gerwyn Price. And we've talked about this before, and it seems like, every week or 2 weeks, one of them wins something and it shifts the perspective. It shifts who is currently the man to beat. But maybe we can just now accept that there are 2 men to beat in World Darts and a couple others who are not that far behind them. Gezi, yes, he's not playing at the same level as he was in March and April. I said that last week, but he's still overall playing pretty well. Michael van Gerwen, he's still beatable. He's not the player he was 5-6 years ago, but he figures out a way, averaging 104 when he needed to against Dimitri Vandenberg, who we'll come on to later. Taking his chances, and yes, he got lucky at times, but taking his chances against Luke Humphries, who couldn't take his. You look in that match, Luke Humphries, he'd been 8 out of 14 on his doubles, going 8-7 up, and then couldn't buy a double the rest of the way. Missed 4 to go 9-7 up. Missed 3 to go 9-8 up, although he still won that leg. Missed 3 more to win the match 11-9. Also missed a dart at full the leg before that. Those 11 missed darts at double over those last 6 legs. And 10 of those in 3 of the legs. And that gave MVG the chance, but MVG took that chance. And when MVG needed a big leg in the deciding leg, he got it. When MVG needed to hit, he hit. And then in the final, he never gave Nathan Aspinall a sniff. Michael van Gerwen, when he really was the man to beat, didn't give people those chances, though. He didn't give someone that opportunity to have 3 darts to win the match. Peter Wright in the Premier League final that 1 year aside. He didn't give people 4 more darts to go 2 legs up and go 2 away in the match. So there's still vulnerability there. There's still that chance to beat him, but that's because overall the players have gotten better. And I'll talk more about Luke Humphries on the next question as well. But is he the man to beat? I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning. I think there are 2 men to beat in World Darts right now, and those are Gerwyn Price and Michael van Gerwen. It doesn't mean they're going to win every event. They're going to win less than half the events because of how good everyone else is at the moment. But they're the people that are at the top of the game, even if they're not the top two in the rankings. They are the ones at the top of the game. They are the ones that players are gunning for. And they are the ones that people like Luke Humphries know and Dimitri Van den Broek know they're going to have to beat if they're going to go on to lift the title. They weren't able to do it this past weekend in the World Series of Darts finals, but they pushed them. Dimitri made Michael van Gerwen play pretty close to his best. Luke Humphries made Michael van Gerwen sweat and made Michael van Gerwen take his chances and create chances in order to win that match. And when you are at the top of the game, that's what players are going to try to force you to do. So in that regard, yeah, he is, but so too is Gerwyn Price.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, and it's a tricky one because I don't think there is a clear-cut answer to this question. And in the past, there's been long spells where Michael van Gerwen, he has been a cut above the rest. He's been hoovering up all these major titles, and you look back to the last 12 months, MVG, he's appeared in 6 of the major singles finals in the PDC. That's more than any other player. It's actually more than Michael Smith, Peter Wright, and Gerwyn Price combined, and he's won 4 of those finals, the Grand Prix Players' Championship finals last year, this year, 2 unranked events, the Premier League and the World Series finals at the weekend. But you use that word vulnerability, and I still think there is some signs of that in his game, and we saw it at the weekend. You mentioned it with Luke Humphries having those 3-match starts to beat him, despite Michael having that 9-darter early on. Luke hanging in there and creating that chance to win the game, missing out, and in the decider, some brilliance from MVG, the 12-darter against Fro, 97 finish. And even going back to the previous night, the first game that Michael played in the tournament against Willie O'Connor, 3-0 down in a race to 6, and it took that incredible 1-6-1 finish to turn that game around and for him to win it 6-4. So in half the games that he played at the weekend, he was right up against it, and perhaps should have gone out of the tournament. But you flip it around and say, well, when his back was right up against the wall in those crucial moments, he was able to produce that bit of magic, that 4-visit leg against Fro, or the huge check out to turn it back in his favour. And that is a sign of a world-class player when they're not at their best. Particularly the game with Willie O'Connor, he was averaging in the low 90s in that game, found a way to win. And I think we've said before about Michael that he's set the bar so high for himself that he's almost on another barometer for his level of play compared to the rest of the field now. So it might sound harsh saying that after he's won the title, he's thrown a 9-darter as well, that I don't think he's the man to beat. But I still think there are question marks around his game. And okay, he's winning a lot more than he was in 2020, 2021 when he was going 6 months without a major title. He's starting to win them more regularly now. And I still think there's other players there. You Gerwyn Prices, your Michael Smiths, Luke Humphries, Nathan Aspinall, knocking on the door, making deep runs, winning these titles. So I'm not sure what we've got at the moment, whether it's a big 4, 5 or 6 at the top of the game, but we are coming into this important time of the year. Michael van Gerwen is going into it with titles under his belt, and that's a dangerous sign for the rest of the field. And I think if we were to ask this question in 3 months' time and Michael's won maybe 2 or 3 more majors, the Grand Prix, Grand Slam, maybe a 4th World Championship, then I think the answer to this question is going to change. But at the moment, I don't quite think he's head and shoulders above everyone else, despite winning the title at the weekend.
Now, aside from Michael van Gerwen, who were the biggest winners from the weekend in Amsterdam?
Well, straight away, the first name that comes to mind is Keegan Brown. He won through that tour card holder qualifier to get into the World Series finals. And if you watched the broadcast at the weekend, he mentioned that his flight to Amsterdam got cancelled. And I think it was his partner who ended up driving them both to Amsterdam. So not ideal preparation before the event. But Keegan, a great run, getting to the quarterfinals, his first quarterfinal on TV since the Grand Slam 2014. So almost 9 years since he's had a run like this on TV. And I think topped off with that 1-6-4 finish, the match-winning checkout to beat Gerwyn Price in the last 16. It's a contender for checkout of the year. And I spoke a minute ago about Gerwyn Price being one of those leading players at the moment, but he keeps performing well and losing. And when a player's checking out a 1-6-4 to beat you, then that's when you know that your luck's not in at the moment. And another player, Nathan Aspinall, getting to the final, just had nothing left in the final, and it was a real battle for him to get past Peter Wright in the semi-finals, but still a good weekend for him. And Luke Humphries, 3-match starts to knock out Michael van Gerwen. He's going to be gutted about that, but still a semi-final run, and it does feel like he is getting closer to that first major. A 106 average to beat Christoph Ratajski, a 98 average 10-2 win against Rob Cross in the quarterfinals to make that final session. So I think his time's coming. And just lastly, a word on Peter Wright. It might seem strange to say he was one of the bigger winners after averages of 83, 93 and 90 at the weekend from a player that we know is capable and has shown so much more before. But I think there were some glimpses at the weekend that Peter Wright's game is coming back, and particularly in that semi-final against Nathan Aspinall, that was one of the games that I watched at the weekend, and something like 8-4 down, and I thought, well, that's it. He's not coming back from that in a race to 11. Nathan Aspinall's going to get this done pretty comfortably, and there were some moments of brilliance in there from Peter Wright, the magic that we're so used to seeing over the years. And okay, the World Series finals, it's not usually an event that we'll get pumped up for, but in that semi-final, when he got that 1-4-1 finish, I couldn't help but give a round of applause, a cheer for that, because Nathan Aspinall sat on 65 to win the game. 11-8, Peter Wright takes out that 1-4-1, and you could see straight afterwards he starts the next leg with a 180, and you could see he was getting a little bit emotional after that, and the crowd, they were behind him, and it's probably a feeling that he's not had on stage for quite a long time, that feeling of, wow, I've just took out one of those big shots against one of the big players, and I'm right in the mix here, deep into one of these tournaments. But unfortunately for Peter, spurned those chances in the next leg to take it to a decider. But even though he's won titles this year, the World Series, the Euro Tour, it has been a tough year. We've seen Peter Wright's form drop quite considerably, but I think that 1-4-1 finish, the way he kept battling against the world match play champion, I think he can take a lot from that going into the rest of the season now.
I'll start where you finished off with Peter Wright, and you mentioned the pluck he had in that match, and it wasn't just that 1-4-1. He had a 120, a 167, a double finish for a 90, double finish for an 80, in addition to that 1-4-1, a 180 to leave double 12 that he hit first dart. He had some phenomenal checkout combinations in that match, but then he was just as likely to have 6 clear darts because he was well ahead in the leg and missed them all, just like he did in the decider, just like he did earlier on when he had a chance to get back within 2 legs going into the second break. He had his opportunities, just wasn't consistent enough and was making just way too many mistakes. At the same time, at times it looked like Peter Wright of old. And that's something just we have not been able to say. Raymond van Barneveld looked like he was going to run Peter Wright out of the water in that quarterfinals early on, and then Peter was untouchable in the back end of that match. Part of that was Barney falling off, but part of it was Peter Wright just not giving Barney a chance. His first match was clearly his worst, 3-0 behind. He was 3-2 behind, but he easily could have been 5-0 behind in that match. Haupai-Pua, I have no idea how he wasn't 5-0 up, but just Peter Wright, even though he was 20 points behind in the average, hung in there. And then when Pua's game dropped, Peter Wright never was brilliant, but he was better. That was just the best week we've seen from Peter Wright, even though the individual performances might not stick out. Just in terms of his fight, his drive, his will, that sometimes was starting to lack and starting to slack over the past 6-9 months. So for Peter Wright, I think definitely is one of those players who stuck out as having had a good weekend. Luke Humphries, we both talked about him already, had those 3-match starts to make his second major final. I mean, who knows what Nathan Aspinall would have showed up in the finals if it was Luke Humphries, not the hometown guy, Michael van Gerwen. But I think Nathan Aspinall was just going to be out of steam regardless, especially after such a grueling semifinal, and not having the benefit of that extra break, since it was the second semifinal as opposed to Luke Humphries, who had played the first. I think we would have been seeing Luke win that first major, and the rarest of all things, one of us getting a tip right. It wouldn't have been me, it would have been you, Alex, but it seemed like it was going to happen. He didn't take his chances, but it doesn't distract from the weekend. A brilliant performance against Christoph Ratajski, who was coming off of the Euro Tour title, absolutely dismantling the top seed Rob Cross, who's won 2 World Series events not that long ago. Great weekend for Luke Humphries, even if, yet again, he fell just that little bit short. You mentioned Keegan Brown. He was on my list as well. I even had Halpai Pua on my list as well, beating Graham Usher and should have beaten Peter Wright, just couldn't take his chances. Very entertaining player, a player who I think if we see him come and give the PDC a go, he has another 5-10 points to put on his game. Right now, he's a mid-80s on the stage, but with experience, he'll improve playing these better players more often. He's plucky right now, but he is a player to watch if he comes and gives it a go. And we got to see 2 matches on the big stage, including one against a 2-time world champ, where he was the better player.
Now we'll move on to our first guest on this week's show. As we mentioned earlier, a player that is making their European Tour debut this weekend. He is the former BDO champion of the world. Here's our chat with Scott Mitchell. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the debutants on the European Tour this weekend, Scott Mitchell. Thanks for the time, Scott. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. Yeah, it seems strange to be a debutant at 53 years old, but yeah, it's something that was on my bucket list. I wanted to play in one, and now we're going to one. So yeah, another one ticked off the bucket list.
Happy days. Well, we were just talking off air the last time that we've had you on our show, almost 100 episodes ago now, just before your Ali Pali debut, the end of 2021. So we'll pick things up from there. The result didn't go your way, but what was the experience like playing in what is the biggest tournament in darts for the first time?
Yeah, Ali Pali was a tough one because I was on early on the day. I was the first one on, and sort of like I hadn't expected. There's quite a distance between the players' room and where you go to play. There was lots of things that next time I go back, I know that I'd do differently if I ever got back there. But no, amazing experience. Again, I've just spoken about sort of bucket list stuff, and I really wanted to play there. So one ticked off, and I really want to play there again.
Well, that appearance at Ali Pali, it capped off your first year as a tour card holder, and to get to the Worlds in your first year, that's the goal for a lot of first-time players on the tour. So when you had some time to reflect on it, how did you assess on how things went in that first year?
Well, the first year I think was a bit of a breeze. It was it flew by. It flew by. I felt that you come out of Q school so sky high of getting a card and everything, and the first year was just an absolute bliss. You know that you've got the year or 2 years. The first year you throw with a lot of freedom. You don't worry about who you're playing. You just go there and you enjoy being in the room. And then sort of like towards the end of that year, I had 2 bad games on TV. We mentioned the Ali Pali, and the one before that I lost to Johnny Clayton at Butlins at Minehead in the Players' Championship about 3 weeks before, and it sort of soured the year because the year had been so good, and it sort of slowed me down for the second year. I then started to sort of think, I started to feel that I needed to do more, and when probably if I'd have done half of what I'd done the first year, I would have kept my card comfortably. Yeah,
definitely. I was going to come on to that second year on the tour last year and ended up missing out on the World Championship, and as a result finishing outside the top 64, losing your tour card. Can you put your finger on what went wrong last year?
Not really. I think it was just one of those where I'd finished the first year. I changed darts as well slightly. We made a tweak to the darts, and they took a little bit longer to get used to because I really felt I was keeping my card. So I thought that it's a good time to make a tweak to the darts, make them more perfect, and then I had some difficult draws and some results that I should have won, and before you know it, after a couple of months, you're then chasing rather than setting the pace sort of thing. So I think mentally I probably got the last part of the year wrong. I had COVID also at the start of the year, so I missed one batch of 4 events as well. So, I didn't play the same amount of events as others did. So, and after that, I felt I was chasing, and once you're chasing at the PDC, you're in big trouble.
Well, let's get on to this year then, and even without that tour card, it's been quite a busy one already, and it started with that appearance on TV, the Jeremy Vine on 5 show on Channel 5. How did that come about?
Yeah, that was a sort of that day before type thing. Obviously, I think, the world was grabbed by Michael Smith and him winning the PDC championship on the weekend before, and I think darts was very topical and in the news. And yeah, Jeremy Vine's show is known for having a little bit of a conflab on issues, and darts and was one they wanted to talk about. So I was more than happy to go and do that.
And we've also seen you on our screens in the seniors this year as well, the Circus Tavern, and more recently in York for the match play. How do those events compare to events playing on the tour?
They're very similar. A lot of people think that it would be a little bit more relaxed. We're all a bit old. We're all in our later life, and we shouldn't. But for me, it's renewing old rivalries and creating rivalries against people that were probably just a little bit out of my time coming in to the game. So, even some of those guys like Rob Thornton and people like that, they had just moved and gone from the BDO when I had started. So, I've renewed rivalries with people that I haven't ever had rivalries with. It's the most amazing concept, and I think we've all seen that the standard is getting better and better. Even most recently, I lost to Paul Hogan in the first round at the match play with a 94.95 average. It's one of those. It's progressing, and I hope that it can continue to progress, because I think there's something there for us.
Yeah, we definitely enjoyed that game between you and Paul Hogan. That was a real battle. And the tournament before the World Championship, it was the battle of the pink shirts, you and Peter Manley at the tavern. I know his antics are all in jest and a bit of fun, but not something that you come across that often.
No, absolutely. I remember when I started wearing pink back in about 2007, 2008. Not even the girls wore pink in the dart tournaments at that point. I walked in with a pink shirt and everybody just looked at me. And it's just something that I've always done. It came around when I used to play local pub football, and I used to wear pink and black cycle shorts under my football shorts. And when I made the UK Open in 2007, the lads in the team, I was running the club at the time, and the local clubs, I was the club football secretary. And the lads said, well, when you said you played darts, we thought you just messed around on a Monday night at the pub, not getting on telly. So they bought me my first pink and black shirt, said, here's your pink and black shirt. You're not having anything to do with this club no more. You're going to carry on with this darts. Here's a sponsor. He'd like to sponsor you. Here's his number. And off we went. So that's where the pink and black started, and it's pretty much stuck ever since.
Very nice. Well, off the hockey, we've seen you switch manufacturer as well. A long time you were with Winmore, you're now over to Cosmo. So how's that change gone so far?
Well, with Winmore, I had 14 absolutely amazing years. They picked me up when nobody knew me, and we just couldn't get to a place where we were both happy with the deal. And we both agreed that the best thing to do was to part company amicably. And like I say, I had 14 great years with them. And so we couldn't reach where we wanted to both be at the right time. So never say never. I'm sure that one day, we'll talk again. But at the current moment, Cosmo came in and offered me a nice deal, and I thought, you know what, change is good as a rest. And it's been the difference being is with a foreign sponsor like Cosmo being in Japan, it just takes a little bit of time for the tweaks to be happening. So. You get your initial dart that you design, and then it's not quite what you want, so you send it off, you ask for another tweak. But, of course, coming from Japan, it takes a lot longer than coming from somewhere in the UK. So I've got a dart now that I'm more than happy with. We've just now sort of settled on some flights which arrived the day before the seniors a couple of weeks ago. So, things are looking good with them. I've just got to give myself a chance and give myself time, which... It was the right time to change. Q School's coming up, which I will be going back to. You've heard that here first. You've released the news now. So, I will be going back to Q School in January, and hopefully the darts will be settled in and we'll be ready to go.
Thanks for letting us know. Great to hear that you're going to be involved in Q School again next year. And, well, another thing that you've done this year, as we mentioned at the top, is that you've qualified for a Euro Tour for the first time. You made that trip to Germany for those associate member qualifiers, a big commitment with not many spots up for grabs in those events. So what made you want to make that trip? Were you feeling confident about getting through the qualifiers?
Well, no, not really. Unfortunately, I missed the qualifier, the early qualifiers. I was unable to go to Germany for that weekend, so I missed that. So it was always planned to go and try and qualify, and I feel a bit unlucky actually that I didn't qualify for more. I had a few rough draws, but I'm happy for the one that I've qualified for, obviously, and I'm really excited to go out there and give it a go. I've played in Hungary before, and I know the fans out there absolutely love their darts. So, hopefully there'll be a good crowd in on Friday, and we can go up there and entertain them the best we can.
Definitely, and it's been a long time coming, hasn't it? Because those qualifiers were back in May. We're now into September, so the best part of 4 months. And as a tour card holder, looking back earlier, you got to 4 finals in the qualifiers, so you've come close before, but the time's finally come to make that debut this weekend.
Yeah, I did. The 4 qualifiers, I think I dropped on people like Aspinall and Chisnell, but you've got to beat those guys to go. So I'm just over the moon that I'm finally getting to go. I just don't want the game to pass me by. I want to enjoy the moment, enjoy being at a Euro Tour for the first time, and take it all in, and hopefully it won't be my last.
Definitely, and away from the PDC, we know that county darts is something that means a lot to you as well, and your county Dorset winning promotion to the top division earlier this year, and I think you said 44 years in the waiting. So what's the buzz like around the team now that you are playing in that top tier this season?
Well, yes, 48 years. It's absolutely amazing. We had our first game the other week. We got absolutely tonked. So, it was we dropped on the champions of the last 2 seasons. So talk about baptism of fire. And they were a really, really solid team. But I think what we learned from the weekend, although we got beat pretty heavily, we learned that the gap is not as big as we thought it would be in that particular game. We just we were all a little bit excited. We were all making history playing for the first time. Even clearly myself, I struggled and lost a game to Jordan Brooks himself. But the team, it was all just so exciting. We were all making history, and so sort of like the honeymoon period is well and truly over about getting there, and we've now got to get down to business and start putting points on the board, because I suppose at the end of the day, as long as we finish third from bottom and stay in for a second season, we've got half a chance of sort of developing the team so that we can maybe stay there and have a bit of longevity.
Well, good luck with that. And aside from playing darts, we know you're busy with your commentary commitments as well, the Modus League. We've seen you do some other events as well, not to mention life on the farm as well. Do you feel like you're able to find that right balance now after all these years, or is that something that you still find difficult at times?
I think when I look back now, and there are certain times where the balance isn't quite right because of just the sheer workload at the farm and the fact that you keep going from sort of dusk till dawn. Really, it is. There are some nights we've been sort of working of late, coming in at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, having started at 6 in the morning. So there's always going to be a difficulty in balancing it up, but we just try to do it the best that we possibly can, and and make sure that I do the best job that I possibly can on both counts, really.
And lastly, we're looking forward to you getting the dogs out in Hungary this weekend. I know we joked last time before your Ali Pali debut, would you bring the lead and toy dog back? But I think you said that it's in retirement. Is there any chance it can make a comeback one day for one last time?
Well, it's quite funny, actually, because obviously I've seen Damon Heta producing all sorts of fun with what he does. And when I think back about it, was I one of the pioneers of that? I know I didn't bring on a racehorse like Bob Anderson did or whatever, but I wonder whether I was one of the pioneers. You don't see I remember John Lowe had made a comment when I came out with the Invisible Dog about how I was clowning around and that wasn't what the sport was about. But it now seems this many years on that maybe I was seeing something for the first time and maybe others didn't see. But I've actually had fans messaging me today asking, will I bring the Invisible Dog back? So I'm not even sure where the lead is. So I may go and have a look for it. We'll have to see. But I didn't really have any plans for it to come back. I was more than happy for it to be retired off.
Give the fans what they want, Scott. Well, it's a pleasure to get you back on the show. We appreciate the time. We wish you all the best for that Euro Tour debut and what else is to come this year, and of course Q School next year as well.
Yes, well, absolutely. We can only give it a go, and thanks to you guys for keeping everybody involved and keeping everybody up to date on us. We really enjoyed being on with you, so thanks a lot.
Thanks again to Scott for joining us. Now onto the news that broke after we finished recording last week's show, dropped on Wednesday. We did say we were going to talk about it on this week's show, and it drew up quite the debate on social media. The WDF revealing that the PDC has ruled that players who play at the Lakeside in the WDF World Championships will not be able to play at Ali Pali in the PDC World Championships. They've got to choose one or the other if they qualify for both, and that includes the ladies and youth events in the WDF as well. What was your thoughts when you saw the announcement?
I'm not really that surprised. It seemed like it was moving in this direction. And we'll come on the next question to what it means for Bo Greaves and potentially some of the other female players, but particularly the defending world champion. But as far as just the announcement in general, not attached to any specific player, I thought this was what was going to happen once the WDF announced that it was moving the World Championships from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, because now it does, it overlaps and it steals some of the pre-tournament attention away from the PDC. And if you're going to put on an event, even if it's not intended to compete with the PDC, it's still going to compete with the PDC in terms of what people are talking about, what people are discussing, what people are doing, and potentially which event people are going to. Some people might prefer the more cozy atmosphere of the I was about to say the Winter Gardens of the Lakeside to the raucous affair that is the PDC World Championships at Alexandra Palace. And you might see some people who, if it was in January, might have tried to go to both, but since both are in December, both are going on almost at the same time, might say, you know what, maybe I'll go to the Lakeside first, get my fill of the darts in, hang out with the lads for a weekend, and then enjoy the holidays with my family and not go and spend money at the PDC. PDC is still going to sell out, but it is going to steal some of that attention, especially some of the talking away. And while there's something to gain by having especially Bo Greaves and potentially Fallon Sherrick there, and having that media talk about them before they play at the PDC, because you know they will be talking about it and will be previewing their PDC matches while they're playing their WDF World Championship matches. And there's something to gain from that. At the same time, it's taking away the attention, and the PDC don't need the WDF to advertise the PDC's product for them. So why let those players go play in another event? Why let them go be on television and competing there and taking that attention away while you're trying to build up attention for your marquee event? So from that respect, I get it. But at the same time, it was free advertising for the PDC to have those players playing there, because you know that's all that they would be talking about. How is Bo Greaves going to do in a week's time? How is Fallon Sherrick or Mikuru Suzuki ever going to do? And now you're losing out on that.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? And I promised I'd read some of the thoughts from our listeners who got in touch with us about this, and a few of them are quite split on it. Warren Allsworth saying, genuinely don't see how this move benefits the PDC in any way. If Bo decides to play WDF, then that's a huge loss of a big story for Sky, and likes of Vampire, Puha surely become a bigger story if they were to win Lakeside. And Darts Tennis saying, I see the point of the PDC, though lower ranked tour card holders might already feel too restricted and a bit disadvantaged compared to non-tour card holders. This most important restriction applies to everyone now at least, and protects the tour card holders and the tour card system. And last one from our listeners, I understand this coming from Elliot, I understand the PDC's motivation for doing this, but I think it's very harsh to introduce for this year when players have already been playing events to try to qualify for both. Also not a great look to introduce a rule when they know specifically who it is affecting. And when the news came out, I said it was a poor decision from the PDC, and almost a week on from it now, I still feel the same way. And I feel for the players who this affects, mainly Bo Greaves, Luke Littler, and as you said, we'll come on to Bo in a moment in our next question. But for Luke, he's got his tour card for next year through the development tour. This was going to be his last crack at Lakeside, but not just the men's world championship, but also the World Youth Championship, the boys event in the WDF, and it's one of the very few events that Luke hasn't won at a youth level. So to deprive him of 2 World Championships there, it's got to be disappointing for him. And my view personally is that if you don't have a tour card, you should be able to play in whatever events that you qualify for. As long as you don't have that tour card, you've not got the restrictions. And if you qualify for 2 World Championships and they don't clash, then happy days. You should be able to play in both of them. So I think the ruling from the PDC, it does more harm than good. And I feel for the WDF as well, because there's been a lot of talk between them and the PDC on what their stance was going to be. And for the PDC to come out with this verdict, it's got to be a big blow for them. And we know that the WDF, they're not in competition with the PDC. The PDC run the professional side. The WDF, one of several organisations underneath the PDC, putting events on. And it's not like the old days where you had the BDO against the PDC. So this decision for me, it gives off that idea that there are 2 organisations in competition, when I think pretty much any darts fan looking at it will say that they're not in competition. And it gives off a divide, I guess, between the 2 when they should be working together. So I think it's a disappointing move from the PDC, and I'll be interested to hear how they came to that decision, and hopefully we can get Matt Porter or someone else from the PDC on and ask them how they came to that decision.
That seems like a good idea. Maybe we should. We'll definitely look into that because, well, it's been a little while now since we've had Matt Porter on, and hopefully he'll be willing to come on. And there's other things now that the calendar's out that we would love to discuss. But as we both previewed, the question of the week now, if you were Bo Greaves, then maybe I'm closer to being Bo Greaves since I'm 44-2 in my league so far since joining it. Which World Championship are you playing in, WDF or PDC?
Yeah, you've definitely got the winning record to say that you're the Bo Greaves out of the 2 of us. And yeah, one of our questions of the week, I think the last time I looked this morning, 450 votes so far, 33% of our listeners going with the WDF, going with Lakeside, 67% going with the PDC, Ali Pally. And a few of our listeners getting in touch again. Dart Freak, Jacko saying, tough one. I would opt for WDF because of the chance to get a world title. On the other hand, she will be the top favourite there, so anything less than the title might be disappointing. And moreover, playing the PDC World Championship is good for experience, and playing better players may also develop her more. Matthew Dean Allen says, can she win a game against the Pro Tour players? It's 8 out of 10 that she doesn't. Can she win the WDF? Almost 100%. So I think either way you look at it, it's a tough decision to make. And I just alluded to it a moment ago that this isn't a decision that Bo should have to make, because I think she should be able to play in both. And the PDC talk about wanting to give more opportunities to ladies players in darts. Well, this ruling means that you've got the top ladies player in the world having to pick. I don't think the decision is going to be based on money for Bo. I think every time that we've spoke to her or you've heard her on interviews, her main drive for playing darts is the enjoyment factor, and she's going to go to the events where she feels she'll get the most enjoyment out of it and she'll get the most fun out of playing. And I guess the main draw for going to Ali Pally is another chance to try and make a bit of history, become the second female player after Fallon Sherrick to win a match in the PDC World Championships. And okay, Ali Pally is by far the bigger of the 2 events. There's bigger rewards on offer, and yeah, I don't envy Bo having to decide between the 2 of them. If it was me, I'd go with the WDF. I'd go for that Women's World Championship, try and become a multi-time world champion. And you look at her age as well, still I think only 19, so there's a lot of years ahead for her to make that jump to the PDC, try and get a tour card and try and get into a lot more of their world championships. I think for the time being it's a great chance to go back to Lakeside, try and defend that title and join that short list of names that's got more than one ladies world championship to her CV. And she'll probably not be thinking this, but if she was to opt for the Lakeside over Ali Pally, that's going to send a message out there, isn't it, to the PDC to say you might want to rethink this, because in the past we've seen when these scenarios have come up, 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 times out of 10, the players have gone for the PDC over the other world championship. If we start seeing players go the other way, the PDC might turn around and say, okay, let's make it a bit fairer. Let's say that you can play in whichever one you want. And then they're also going to get those top players in their event as well.
This is a really tricky question. And it goes to some of the stuff we talked about a few months ago when we were saying, well, we talked about it after she won the Women's World Match, but we also talked about it earlier in the year about whether she should go to Q School. And there's only one right answer, and that is whatever Bo Graves feels comfortable at this stage in her career. But I think the better challenge for her would be going to the PDC, because I think she's at least talent-wise ready. And I know I'm saying this after what was her second worst weekend, if not her worst weekend, on the women's series to date, winning only one title. But at the same time, overall, she is a cut above all of these players. Even when she's not on her best game, even when she's nowhere near her best game, she still wins one of the 4 titles because of just how talented she is. But the next step in her progression is playing against the best players in the world, regardless of sex, regardless of gender. And going to the PDC World Championship is that chance. You go back last year, yes, she had the worst result in terms of scoreline of any of the 3 female players at the PDC World Championship, but she also had by far the toughest draw. Willie O'Connor at that time was playing as a top 32 caliber player. He was in contention for the world match play if he had a good start to the year. He was moving up the rankings, and he looked the real deal. And Bo Graves had a couple chances to maybe nick a set if she had hit some bigger setup scores at times, but she didn't have a chance in that match the way she was playing. If she played her best, yes, she would have. But even playing her B game against a player who was in form like that, it was just too much to ask. And that's why she went out in straight sets. But she didn't make a fool of herself. Second time at the PDC World Championship stages, I think she can improve a lot. And I think she's a better player overall than she was a year ago. And I think that's now the next challenge for her. But does she feel ready? Does she feel like that's what she wants to do? Or is her goal to go and win another world championship, to become a back-to-back WDF world champion? And okay, we know the previous titles were BDO prior to her first title last year, but there still haven't been that many women who've retained a world title, whether it's BDO or WDF. Mikuru Suzuki, the last 2 BDO world championships, obviously Trina Gulliver, who retained it on multiple occasions. Leisha Ashton retained her title twice, Anastasia Abramoslova, but that's it. There's not been that many, and she has that chance to do it and to put her name in the history books. But I just don't think that's worth the effort, even if it's £20,000 again, even if there's more money than winning a first-round PDC World Championship match, which we don't know if there will be, because we also don't know exactly what the PDC World Championship prize fund is for sure yet. But even if there is, I think the bigger challenge and the bigger opportunity is to go to that PDC World Championship. But it goes back to what I said. The correct answer is what she feels comfortable at this stage in her career. If she's ready to take on the PDC World Championship and she's ready to go to Q School, then I think going to the PDC World Championship is the answer. If she thinks that's still a year or two off, then it's which event does she want to go to more? And only she knows that answer.
We shall see. We'll definitely be keeping an eye on for that decision and when it's going to be announced. We'll be back in a moment to answer some of your listener questions. But before we do, let's head to Stratford, London. I was at the Target launch on Tuesday night. This is me talking after we've finished recording this show, and delighted to say we're going to bring you a chat from the Target launch, the 3-time champion of the world, the former Premier League champion, now making his name in the commentary box. Here's our chat with Glen Durrant. Alex Moss here from the weekly Dartscast, and look who we've got with us. It is the 3-time champion of the world, Premier League champion, and the busiest commentator in darts right now, Glen Durrant. How you doing?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for your nice messages on Twitter. You know, the fact that when you're sitting there in the comms box and you just happen to look at a tweet and it says something like, "Isn't Glen Durrant a breath of fresh air?" So I'm going to start the interview by saying thank you very much. I'm always trying to do my interviews with you and Burton, etc., but you know, it's great to read things like that. So thank you.
No, it's genuine. It's great to see you you moving on to that side of things with the commentary, and it's probably difficult as well because you want to go in and make a good impression. It's probably a bit of pressure, but a different kind of pressure to play.
It's incredible. It is so difficult. When I say to you now, and Glen, 5, 4, 3, I was having words set up, and then Susan went and go. The first word I would say was, where does that come from? It is so difficult. And people like Dan Dawson, Mardles, Chris, they make it so easy that it's a lot tougher than I anticipated. But I went in there as someone I wasn't, the first one, and it was my wife that was like, why are you using words I've never heard you use? And we've been together 35 years. So I soon realised I was trying too hard. But I think I'm getting my balance. I know I'm talking too much still. But I'm learning, and I'll get better, just like I did at darts.
You've got plenty of involvement. You're doing the Modus, you've done the Women's Series, the Euro Tour Players Championships. I'm guessing the next step for Glen Durrant is a bit of TV work with the PDC. Any chance of that coming?
Well, I've sent a CV and I've had a conversation as well, but the ITV don't really change their setup, and the PDC are pretty stacked with the amount of people who've got there. What I've learnt in life is don't chase too hard. If it happens, it happens, and if I get a call to say they were interested, then I'd be interested. But I'm at my happiest at the Modus Super Series, and I'm a big believer in that you learn your groundwork, and I'm learning so much there. Then you've got the Pro Tours, where I did one in February and I wasn't very happy with my performance because I couldn't get that transition correct from the Modus Super Series to the Players Championships. But I had a fantastic Euro Tour with a single thing. I knew I did good. Sometimes I was like, yes, I nailed it. And then in Jenna last week I was quite critical of myself because I set the bar now. Then I had a fantastic Modus Super Series where I'm seeing myself as more of a league commentator now, working with people who are not confident opening and ending. And then I thought I did well at the Women's Series as well because I learned to commentate without raising my voice. There's no crowd there. So there's no point, Lorraine, it's 100. There's no crowd there, so I'm beginning to learn less is more.
Well, let's get on to your darts. We saw you at the World Seniors Championship, and when you spoke to us, you said it was more kind of a favour for Jason because of the support he's given you, but you've come back into it, you played at the match play, we saw an improvement on your performance, so how pleased are you to see that game starting to come back?
Well, I lied. I was playing brilliant. I am playing brilliant, but I can't transfer that into game on yet. My practice at the moment is fabulous. I'm at the target launch right now, and I've just picked up 3 darts and threw them at the dartboard with a crowd behind me. 6 months ago I would never have done that because I'm thinking they're laughing at my throw. I'm hitting 180s so regular in practice now. I'm loving the dimmy dart I'm throwing. I feel fatter in my hands. So when I spoke to you and said I was just doing a favour for Jason, I knew I was 250 to 1. I went there to win it. When in the practice room beforehand, Jim McCune was saying Glen wasn't missing. I was 180. Everyone was like turning round, and I said, as soon as I went game on, then all my demons come back to me, and I couldn't just get that pull back. That is my big problem. But I know I will. I'm going to do some ADs. I'm going to do a Modus Super Series in January. Well, only the Weekly Dartcast knows it's going to be January the 4th. Okay. So you've got to scoop there. Right. So I'm going to, and the reason being is I want Ali Pally to be on a bit of a high, and really I want the Modus Super Series. I want people, while they love darts, and then tune into the Modus Super Series, then that maybe we'll get some good hits. The fact I'm playing on there, so it's quite a selfish reason as well. Because it'd be good for the Modus Super Series. It'll be good for me. So January the 4th. Group B, Weekly Dartcast, you've got the scoop.
Days, looking forward to that. And lastly, our co-host Burton, he's a Middlesbrough fan like yourself. Legend. We had a listener question a few weeks ago asking Burton, are Middlesbrough going to get relegated? I don't think they are, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's scary. So we've always loaned players the past 5 or 6 years. Villa, has been we had a couple of cracking players in there. We've gone down the Brighton route of trying to buy a lot of young players, and hopefully we find 1 or 2 superstars that we can begin to gel. But at this moment, bottom of the league, that's when panic can set in a little bit. They're not gelling together, they're not playing, they're young, so it's scary time. We play Sheffield Wednesday tonight, who was second bottom, I guess if we lose that game, it's scary, Chaz. I don't think we'll get relegated, but it's not the best time to be a Borough fan. It's not the best time to travel 3 hours of Chris Dobie now with them away to Milan. It's not had better days.
Well, a good time to come in for Dazzler in the commentary box. We're loving your work. Keep it up, and best of luck with the Modus League series next year as well.
Awesome interview. Thank you.
Thanks again to Glenn for joining us, and a big thank you to Target as well for letting us be a part of their launch this week. Do go and check them out on social media, Target Darts. Check them out on the website. Check out all the new stuff that they've got coming out. And we've got 2 listener questions in the mailbag to get through before we go, and the first one comes from friend of the show, Andrew Sinclair, and as we are now a boxing podcast, he asks us, who wins in a fight, KSI or Salt Pappy?
Well, we were talking about this before we started recording, and I'll let you fill in the entire story if you want about where this came from. But I had not heard of any. You said when you first heard this question, you would have not heard of any, although you now know who KSI is. I don't even have a coin near. Oh, no, I do have a coin near me. Except I have my jar, which has God knows how many coins in it that I've kept over many a year in case of a rainy day. So I'm going to flip a coin that's dated the year after I was born. So let's see. His heads is going to be KSI. Tails is going to be Salt Pappy. Let's see. KSI is going to win. Guaranteed.
There we go. Well, yeah, I've got to say as well, just seen Andrew this afternoon, and I thanked him personally for the question and giving you a bit of a background on this one. When we last got together for the World Seniors at the Tavern back in February, a couple of lads got chatting to us after the darts had finished one night, and one of the questions that they put to me and Andrew was, who's going to win the Premier League darts? And I said, I'm not really that bothered. And the next one was, who wins in a fight, KSI or Salt Pappy? And it only feels right that we are talking about some boxing after the weekend. And as you just mentioned there, knew a little bit about KSI now. Salt Pappy, don't really know who that is, but KSI, I do know that he's fighting Tommy Fury, who's the brother of Tyson Fury. So that sounds pretty high profile. It sounds like he's the higher pedigree of the two. Your coin went with KSI. We'll have a full out, so I'm going to go KSI as well. And would I watch the fight if it happens? Unlikely, but I hope that our opinions have helped you make your choice as well, Andrew.
And John Rawling and the rest of the people that turn to us for their boxing podcast needs. And lastly, one more question from a listener. This one comes from Nathan Barrington. Considering he went out first match again, should we be concerned for Michael Smith's form?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and a lot was made of Michael Smith's switch from unicorn to shot in the summer, changing darts manufacturers, and looking at his results since the switch, he's played 24, won 15, lost 9. And that first event, I remember it with his new darts. It was on the Euro Tour. First game, he had a 101 average. The next day, 111 average. And we had the shot MD, Peter McCormick, on the show a few days after that. And I was saying that you couldn't have asked for a much better endorsement for your new darts than seeing Michael throw those big averages in your first event. But I think since then, we are seeing that Michael is looking for that bit of consistency in his game at the moment. And I mentioned the 24 games that he's played, 12 of those he's averaged under 95, some below 90 in the 80s. I think the lowest was an 83 in one of the Players' Championship events. And then the other half of the games, the 12 games, he's averaged 95 and above. And there's been that 111 that I mentioned, 107. It's not the kind of form that you'd expect from a world number one and a world champion. And I think that's got to be a concern for Michael, that we are coming into the business end of the season. He's got that World Championship title defence. It's going to come around sooner than you know it. That opening night at Ali Pali, he's got the Grand Slam title defence before then, and he's not in the best of form right now. And we know that the game's there. He's thrown those big averages. There's been some games where he's lost with big averages as well. But I think this isn't an issue for the last few months. I think this is an issue that we've seen throughout 2023. He's trying to get that level of consistency again as a world champion, and the consistency that got him those first two major titles last year. And I don't think Michael's a player that's going to panic too much. I think we've seen from how his career's gone so far that he has built that strong belief inside. After those major final defeats, he's got that resilience to keep pushing, and I think the results are going to come. So I think if you're a Michael Smith fan, you're probably more worried about his form at the moment. But I think if you're Michael Smith, you're going to be confident that he can find that form ahead of Ali Pali. So if I'm him, I'm not going to be too concerned at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not concerned either. And part of that is because I think, the same thing that I've said, although we'll see if it comes true this year for Peter Wright, but the same thing I said about Peter Wright last year and the last few years, and we've seen about other players, is I think Michael Smith has been trying to learn multiple things, one of which is how to play as the world number one. And that's been a bit shaky this year. And he's not fully risen to the occasion of being the number one ranked player in world darts. But again, it takes time to figure that out. But the other thing I think, and we'll see what happens over the next few months, but I definitely thought it was the case last year. I think it was the case the year before as well. I think he knows that the most important time of the year is October, November, December, where we have major after major culminating in the World Championship. And like Peter Wright, like Phil Taylor used to do, he's trying to focus his year on the buildup that starts now and culminates in the World Championship defense. And that doesn't mean he's not trying to win each of these tournaments that he's in, but he's not putting all of his energy and all of his eggs into the basket of those events. And, he's gone on a couple holidays over the summer. He's gotten away from the game. And now's the time to get down to business. Try to make sure that you're ready to repeat your world title. And, you go back to that last set of Players' Championship events now a couple weeks ago. Very inconsistent, 3 matches, under 90, went out to, losing to Jan van Veen's not a bad loss. Losing to Jan van Veen with an 83 average when Jan van Veen was only averaging 92 himself, that's a bad loss. But he's eased into the week. And by the end of it, he was beating Josh Rock in a match that Josh Rock threw a 107 at him. He averaged 104 against an in-form that week, Mensur Suljovic, averaged over a ton against Simon Whitlock when Simon Whitlock threw that ton back at him. Losing only to Luke Humphries, Jan van Veen, and Daniel Klaassen. Who's Daniel Klaassen? If you listen to one of those boxing podcasts, by now. But he, made a final that week. So, it was a good overall set of results for someone who's now starting to try to come back into form, now starting to come back. And it was never that he was completely out of form, but he hasn't been at his best. And, the other thing to mention is that so far this year, excluding players who have played in fewer than 10 matches, he's only 30th in averages in the Players' Championship events. And I think that sums up the year he's had to date. But I think he's now getting to the point of the year that he's been focused on. He's learning to play as world number one, and now it's the time to get down to business because it's the business end of the year. Let's see how the next month goes. And then I think coming back to this question will be important, because if he hasn't had a deep run in a major, if he hasn't noticeably lifted his form, then yeah, I will start to get worried. But right now, I'm not there yet. Anything else for this week?
Well, as always, we have to say a big thank you to our guests for joining us. Thanks to Scott, and we're recording this before the Target launch, so thank you to Target for hosting me tonight. And if we do get any interviews from tonight, we'll either play them in this week's show or we'll save them for next week's show, and we'll speak more about that next week as well. And thank you to Darts Corner for their continued support for the show. Darts Corner, they are the #1 online darts retailer in the world, and if you need a new set of darts, a new dartboard, if you fancy a new surround, a cabinet, darts case, new set of flights, you name it, they've got it. So go and check them out. Links in the description, or you can just search for Darts Corner for all your darting needs. And just lastly, thanks to everyone for listening. I'm off to get ready for tonight, and you know that once I'm there, there's only one piece of advice that I'm going to be following, and that is to make sure I enjoy the darts.
Well, I'll hang tight until I find out that you're enjoying the dart. Well, we'll be back next week to recap the Euro Tour and start looking ahead. Only a couple weeks to the Grand Prix now, so a lot to discuss as we get to that money end of the year. We'll be back next week, so hang tight, enjoy the darts, and we'll see you on the other side.